Chair, I rise noting the return of the bill to this House after what's been a lengthy debate in the Legislative Council, one that I have respected from this distance and continued to participate in as the Shadow Minister for Child Protection. And can I say at the outset, the efforts that we all undertake in this space are necessarily towards the state's most important responsibility, that is to attending to the needs of our state's most vulnerable children. And if there's one thing I share with the Minister in this regard, it's towards their thriving, towards their flourishing and thriving, albeit in circumstances of having faced in many cases, greatest challenges that children might face, and that they are in need of the supports that are provided by the department is something that we all need to address in our day-to-day lives. The opposition doesn't share the government's view about how child protection is best structured and directed in this state. And I find myself referring to my second reading contribution when the bill was last in this House. I reflected at that time that my expectation was that the principles guiding child protection in this state would remain controversial. And if the last months have proved anything, it's that that's certainly true. What surprised me in about January, and perhaps as the result of the Select Committee process in the Legislative Council, was that what emerged over those weeks and into the early stages of this year was that as well as that existence of a controversy about how best to proceed in child protection, there emerged a solidarity, and including importantly in the what might be described as the sector, in among key and credible and sincere stakeholders that participate in the process of legislative reform outside this place. And so having indicated an expectation that core areas would remain controversial, I think that was proved up to the extent of that expression of solidarity by the sector. It's one thing to have a debate about the best direction to proceed, circumstances where the government has both the initiative and the control of the process. It's another to then see emerging the kind of consensus that emerged in the course of in the process of in the other place. And so I just reiterate that the result of what's occurred in the Legislative Council is that these matters of paramount principle indeed remain controversial, and we'll now see a very clear difference of approach as between the government on the one hand and the opposition on the other. What the government has determined to do, and I don't mean this in any other than a factual observation, is to continue to chart the course that was established back in 2016, ahead of the 2017 Act, that is by the continuation of the adoption as key principle of child protection, safety as the driving paramount principle. It's an approach that remains novel, and increasingly it's an approach that runs contrary to what the rest of the country, indeed the rest of the world, tells us, including the UN, is the better pathway, and that is the adoption of a paramount principle that is the best interest of the child ought to be determinative in guiding all that's done in this space. It might sound simplistic to hear the debate described in terms of safety and best interests, but in many ways, whether one turns to the scholarly contributions that have been led by the South Australian of the Year, South Australia's Australian of the Year, Professor Leah Bromfield, all the way through to those who are involved in the day-to-day work of caring for those vulnerable children, advocating for reunification of children with their family, advocating for greater supports for those involved in out-of-home care, better complaints mechanisms, and so on and so forth. There is a clear unity of view that I've observed about the importance of adopting the best interests of the child as the paramount principle, embracing as it does the great complexity of life that leads to the best possible outcomes for those most vulnerable children, indeed towards their thriving. And I don't say all of this in some sort of theoretical background, theoretical context either. We're here on Budget Day, and we have seen now, over the course of the period since 2016, the establishment of the Department for Child Protection, the establishment of the paramount principle of safety, and all that's followed, particularly over these last 4 years. We have seen a consistent pattern of increasing numbers of children in care, and particularly in state care, an area that we all agree is not where children ought to be. But on Budget Day, we see each year that has come at a ever increasing cost, and indeed at a cost that is greater than even the ever increased provision for child protection. And as the Shadow Minister for Child Protection, I've never come at the budget for child protection with a view to whether or not we're spending more money than is warranted. But I've asked the question from day one at each turn whether the money we spend in child protection, as it increases, and really quite dramatically to transform the size of that department, is more money into child protection a sign of success or of failure. And I expect I'll be asking that question again in the next short while. So it's not as though the process to date has led us to a place where less resources are required because less children are engaged in these most acute circumstances. Quite to the contrary. And so what's been described as an ongoing crisis, what's been described by me and by others as an ongoing controversy about where the paramount principles in child protection ought to be articulated and how will continue, and that's a matter that I think is going to continue to be of keen interest to all South Australians. I want to pay tribute to several leaders in the sector, in particular, as I do to those members of the Legislative Council in particular who've engaged in the process that's led to the bill coming back to us today. But throughout that period, there has been a solidarity within the sector. As the Minister has said, participants in the sector speak sometimes quietly, carefully, thoughtfully. Sometimes they speak up and speak loudly. In all their ways, I've found that the advocacy of those who are engaged in the sector has been characterised by its sincerity and its commitment, and I'm humbled by what I've seen in that regard. I single out in particular the Chief Executive of Uniting Communities, Simon Shrapple AM, who has been, over these last months, a leading member of a group that have described themselves as the Leadership Coalition for Child Protection. And back in February, published in the Ian Daily, Simon, writing on behalf of the other members of that coalition, wrote a very thoughtful piece about where we were then at in the debate. And remember, that's at a relatively early stage of the Legislative Council debate that's since ensued. And just to quote part of Simon Shraple's observations then, he said, and I quote, "Generally speaking, South Australia's child protection system is often seen as a wicked and ultimately unsolvable problem. It's not. Many of us also believe that it's something that affects someone else, other people's children, other parents and other families. Wrong again. 1 in 3 South Australian children will have some interaction, sometimes unknown to them or their families, with our Child Protection Department during their childhood." Simon then goes on to talk about the reasons why child protection is something that affects so many South Australians directly, and that there is cause for hope in improving how we address child protection challenges in this state, but that we must do so by adopting a different approach than what's been adopted over the better part now of a decade. And it was for that reason that the coalition members, among others, determined that it was necessary and worthwhile to move from a position of doing what could be done with the amendment bill as it was proposed, and rather taking an approach of insisting on changes of a core nature before supporting the passage of the bill. I'll just reiterate again for the committee the four key principles that were articulated by the Coalition for Child Protection at that time, and they've remained maintained consistently ever since. The first, elevating the best interests of the child as paramount principle. The second, the consistent application of the significant harm threshold throughout the bill. Third, the expanding and amplifying of what's described in the bill as active efforts, and I appreciate that there's some discussion about the particular description there. And fourth, the strengthening of provisions that support family reunification. So those four key principles have been articulated throughout the course of this year. They remain key principles that will need to remain controversial. I'm sure will continue to be the subject of advocacy in the time ahead. The fact is that the Coalition has not been satisfied that it's heard a credible response from the government on those four matters of principle. Neither has the opposition, and more work will need to be done. I just note, for the record, those other participants, members of the Leadership Coalition. I've recognised Simon Shrapple, AM, the CE of Uniting Communities. I also recognise and appreciate the input, engagement of Lutheran Care, Rowan Feegrade, KWY, Craig Ridney, Junction Australia, Alyssa Willis, Baptist Care SA, Sue Raw, and Infinity Community Solutions, Shelley Wall. I look forward to continuing to engage productively in this space, including with a view ultimately to reforms that more fully reflect those principles, as we all do. That's with a view to moving child protection away from a conversation that is presently far too often conducted in circumstances of crisis and of difficulty, and into one that is characterised by the kind of success that Simon Shrapple has so well articulated, including in that contribution back in February that I've noted. The opposition, as I've indicated to the government, won't be taking step-by-step, amendment-by-amendment approach. That process has already taken some time. It's all very well documented, and those who've been following the process in the other place have plenty on the record already, including what's transpired just earlier this week. So I make that contribution and look forward to continuing to debate further reforms in this area.
Does the Minister wish to make any other closing remarks?
So thank you to